Welcome to the UNTIED Podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement, because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Bernethy. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and I am with Corey Sawyers today. Unfortunately, Tyler is not able to be with us. He is in Colorado, enjoying whatever it is he's enjoying up there. We sure do miss him, but we know it's always good for him to get up there for whatever reason that it might be, and so we certainly are praying for safe travels home for him. But today we are excited to be with you, and we have a great topic, I think, today, one that is going to be pretty fun to talk about, which is education in the church. And so we have a lot to say about that. Of course, Corey is big into education and in his teaching for Bear Valley. Of course, we both are preaching and teaching in our own congregations, and the work of Excel Still More has a lot to do with education as well, as we share the good news and as we preach and teach the Bible in its purest form. At least that's what we're shooting for, to just preach the text for what it has to say. And so I'm excited to be with you today. I know that Corey is, and so we're going to go ahead and dive into it today. Thank you for joining us on Season 2, Episode 7, as we dive into what's been cooking. Well, Corey, I'll tell you, last night it was smash burgers. That's what was cooking on my grill, although it was a little bit windy, so it didn't work out as good as I planned, because the wind kind of hurts the old heat on the Blackstone. But so we ended up cooking them inside. But that's what I cooked last night, and they were good. They were really, really good. So what's going on with you, man? There's a lot of stuff, school and preaching and life. So what's happening in your world today?
Well, I'm wanting a smash burger now. It's hard to beat a good. Whenever we got to Oklahoma City for affirming the faith, when was that? A week ago. Time flies.
I know.
That's what Tyler and Natalie welcomed us with. Was he had made some smash burgers on his Blackstone, and they were good. But we're just rolling along. It's turning. We keep going back and forth from winter to spring here in Tennessee, and so my middle son Gordon, in addition to preaching for the Knob Creek Church of Christ up on the state line of Tennessee and Kentucky, he also works for one of our deacons in his landscape business, and so we have. I make them breakfast. They call them Sunrise Sawyers sandwiches.
Nice.
And but I make them breakfast sandwiches with eggs and cheese and some sort of meat. And we had some leftover barbecue the other day. And the first time that I made a barbecue breakfast sandwich, my wife snarled her nose and said, "What in the world?" And then she ate it, and she's like, "That is And every time we do barbecue now, I smoke a shoulder or Boston butt or whatever. She'll say, "If we have leftovers, can you make some of those barbecue breakfast sandwiches in the morning?" But it's amazing. If you'll take the hamburger bun and just paint a little barbecue sauce on there, put some cheese. I warm up the barbecue and put on there, and then I take in a large skillet, put a couple of eggs in there and let it spread out, and then fold it up. You know how you can do for a sandwich. And there's something about, you wouldn't think that barbecue and eggs would, I don't know why I wouldn't think that, because basically every breakfast meat we eat is pig. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I made them that Monday. They had sausage yesterday. I did today country ham for them. But anyway, he and Matt Valley, that's one of my morning rituals during the spring and summer while they're mowing, is I make them breakfast sandwiches. So
Nice. That, I would think it would go together. You put hot sauce. Some people put ketchup on it. Why wouldn't barbecue sauce? What is the barbecue sauce you're using?
Well, typically I use I forget the name of it. I use a sugar-free one because I'm diabetic, but they use for theirs whatever we have handy for the most part. We typically, what's the Sweet Baby Ray is what typically Melody will get, but they're not real. I'm not a huge barbecue sauce guy. There's a barbecue restaurant that I don't remember which one it is now, maybe Central in Memphis, but there's a barbecue restaurant that I've gone to where they say that the smoke is our sauce. And I'm a firm believer that if you've really if you've done a good job with the meat, you don't really need
nothing. Yeah.
Now on ribs, I like it on ribs. I'm not. The debate is dry rub or wet ribs. I think that's a false dichotomy. I smoke them with a dry rub on them, and then there at the very last, I put some sauce on them.
Yeah, that's what I do.
But anyway, usually on barbecue sandwiches, I'm good with just the bun, the meat, and a little bit of slaw. And like you said, I might put some hot sauce on it, some Louisiana hot sauce. But
I like the Cholula. Cholula hot sauce is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I like Sweet Baby Ray's. I did that for a long time. My favorite sauce is Head Country habanero and apple, which they do have a sugar-free version.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not hot. You would think it would be hot, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't have much heat at all, surprisingly. But the taste is just really good. And I've got to where that is my prefer. I put it on everything if I'm using barbecue sauce at all, especially on my ribs. Whenever I go, that's what I do is I baste it at the end. And man, it's got a really good taste. So that's always a favorite.
Yeah, what I really like to do is, do y'all know in Oklahoma what a Johnny cake is? Or a hoe cake, sometimes they're called?
Maybe. I don't know that I know. It's
your cornbread batter that you would normally make cornbread with. You pour it in a pan and fry it like a pancake.
Okay.
But my favorite thing to do is to make those and then kind of like an open face taco, put the barbecue meat on there, then put slaw on the top. There's a little hot sauce on it.
Yeah.
And there's actually Martin's Barbecue, which there's several of them around the Nashville metro area. They serve that very same thing. First time I went in there, I'm like, this is what we do, And they say that it's West Tennessee style barbecue. And the first time we went there, I said, I've never heard of West Tennessee style barbecue. I've heard of Memphis, I've heard of St. Louis, Kansas City, whatever, but never West Tennessee. And actually the guy that started that chain of restaurants some of you that have been to the Freed Harbin lectureship have gone out to Jack's Creek Barbecue. That's where he worked when he was in college and where he learned to do barbecue, whole hog barbecue. So that's why but anyway, they call it a hillbilly taco, I think, something like that. But
that's a great name.
Yeah. But just mix up your cornbread batter. It's really good if you're making like Mexican cornbread or jalapeno cornbread.
Yeah.
And then fry it like you do a pancake and in a little butter and plop the meat on there, put you a spoon of slaw and go to town.
Man, that sounds really, really good. I don't think I've ever had that I at least can remember.
Well, the history of the Johnny cakes, they're called, is because the Johnny ribs, that's what they would eat supposedly during the Civil War. They wanted cornbread, but they didn't have ovens and stuff out in the camp, so they would mix up the batter and for a lot of times that's all they had to eat was just the hoe cakes. But
I can
anyway,
see why that would stick through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, man, now I'm just getting hungry. I haven't eaten breakfast. Well, I did. I had some yogurt. That's where I'm at this stage in the morning. Yogurt and coffee.
Yeah, me too. I've had an Atkins espresso protein shake, and I down that on my way to work usually, and then drink a bunch of coffee. But
yeah, that's going right. Sometimes I'll go get I love breakfast burritos, and sometimes my wife and I will make we'll make a bunch of breakfast burritos. And my wife is such a great cook. She knows exactly how much to make for. You just give her a number, and she's like, "Okay, this is how much we need." And I'm sitting there, I'll argue with her, like, "No, you need more, you know, whatever." She's like, "No, this is it," and it's always exactly right. And then, then she kind of rubs it in my face a little bit, but all in good fun, But she is such a good cook, and we might make 30, 40 breakfast burritos and get them all wrapped up, and we'll put them, in the fridge ready to go, or freezer or whatever. And they're gone in 2 days because my 3 sons that are at home are garbage disposals. They can eat and eat and eat and eat. So I never hardly get any. So we spend all that time doing that, and then I'm like, well, I guess I'm going back to my yogurt.
That's what Wes and Terry Altry would do that occasionally for the students at Bear Valley, like on finals days and stuff. They'd make a bunch of breakfast burritos, and then they'd put them in a crock pot, keep them warm, and when you got there, you could just come through and get you a breakfast burrito. And that's Wes and Terry, though. They're servants for sure. That's Tyler's, but for the benefit of everyone else, that's Tyler King's mother and father-in-law, and a couple of our very best friends. But Melody's also a really good cook, and she's better at like how to make, like when I make stuff, my philosophy is I don't know how much this is going to make, but I'd rather have too much is not enough. So we end up, usually when I fix something, we end up eating on it several days, especially now that we only have 1 garbage disposal living with us instead of 3.
Yeah.
But anyway, even with that, at Gannon, man, he's skinny, but he can put away the food, and he drinks a gallon of milk a day, it seems like.
Yeah.
We're going to have to buy us a milk cow before long, I'm afraid, but milk will fill you up. You would think that he'd be full all the time, but every time I turn around, he says, and it's not I'm hungry, it's I'm starving, or I'm famished, or I'm like, do you really look up the meanings of those words? Because you just ate like an hour and a half ago. You're not famished.
I remember those days, especially when I was playing football in high school and college. I knew exactly what that felt like. And I'll tell you this, I don't eat McDonald's hardly anymore, unless it's just, that's all that's around, which in Oklahoma, there's a few places like that. But they used to have a 5 for $5 Big Mac deal. You get 5 Big Macs and 2 large fries and 2 large drinks. And I would order that, and I would eat all of it. And about an hour later, I would go and get some more food. I have people that can come on here and testify to that. That is no joke. I was just starving, but you were burning so many calories. And we were training nonstop, and from running in the morning to weights, and you're just hungry. And I think every guy, well, maybe not every guy, but there was another guy that was in our youth group. He didn't do any sports. At all. He was a nice guy, but he played games and that was about it. I mean, he wasn't very active. He could eat more than I could. and he wasn't doing all the stuff that some of us were doing. And especially in the summer. I'll tell you the best meal at the best time. Every summer we'd be hauling hay, and there was 2 things that my grandma would bring. She would bring either like a chicken salad sandwich. She did that several times. Or she would go and get a Sonic double cheeseburger. And man, there's no better food than that whenever it's 100 degrees outside and you've been in a barn all day. It's the best meal in the world. Just give me a chicken salad sandwich. Let me sit there for a while and enjoy myself. But
You're talking about eating a lot, playing football. He's distant kin to me, but a lot of people in Northwest Tennessee will know the name Hugh Adams. He's a brother in Christ, a good and godly man, one that I've looked up to for years. He played football at Dresden High School and then at Mississippi State. He was a nose tackle. This is back in the 60s that he played. But he always talks about, and he was a big man, but in fact, had he been a little bit taller, he probably could have played in the NFL, but he wasn't the height that they were looking for. But anyway, team captain while he was down at Mississippi State. He was just a really good player. But he and his roommate, he said, well, here we were college students. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were so hungry. He said the only place we could go to get full is we'd go down to the Crystal there in town at Starkville. And he said you could get 10 of those Crystal burgers for $1.
Yeah.
So he said we'd throw $10 down on the counter and get 100 of those things.
That's awesome.
And that's what they'd eat.
That's great.
Which, a Crystal hamburger is about 85% bread.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's one of my favorite stories from back in his days. That and him great. Sacking Steve Spurrier, that was a good thing too.
Hey,
so
that's good right there. Yeah, I remember when party burritos at Taco Bueno used to be 69 cents. You can go get 15 or 20 of those and down them. Of course, they're not.
I was telling the boys the other day, they were some commercial came on about Taco Bell's Nanny's menu or something, and I told them, I said, when I was in high school, that's where we would drive from Dresden to Martin, because for $5 we could get a tray full of food at Taco Bell. Now you get like one chalupa is $5, but back then we were getting a tray full of food for $5, and it was worth the drive over to Martin just to get it. Of course, gas was like 99 cents a gallon back then too. But
right.
Back in the old days.
The good old days.
Yes.
When you could eat all that food and enjoy it. And now...
Mm-hmm. Now I think about a strawberry shortcake and I gained 6 pounds. So we walked in this morning and somebody has cinnamon rolls up here at the church building. And I smelled the cinnamon rolls. I didn't even see them. I just smelled them in the hallway when I walked in the building. And immediately I gained 3 pounds. My pants got tighter. So,
yeah, the joys of age. Well, now cinnamon roll sounds really good. That's another thing. My wife cooks really good cinnamon rolls. Well, it is the show now that, of course, we do this every other show. I should have said that. Where we now move into our Bring Your Best Books. I know we could talk about a lot of stuff all day long, especially food-wise, but let's get into some spiritual food. And we've got a couple books apiece that we'd like to throw your way. We'll put these in the show notes and link them to where if you are interested in purchasing them, you can. Again, we are not affiliated with any of these that we're putting out there. We just feel like they would benefit you in some ways. So, Corey, what are a couple books that you want to throw out there to our listeners?
Well, the first is written by a man named Philip D. Kennison. Kennison with E, not an I. It's called Life on the Vine. And the subtitle is Cultivating the Fruit of the Spirit in Christian Community. And it looks like this. It's got a little, I don't know. I don't know if you can see the name, how it's spelled there. Kenneson. But it's a really good book. We had to read this book. Bob Turner was the one that had me to read this book in leadership. And really good premise of the book is kind of the idea that, we sometimes say the fruits of the Spirit, and, the the idea that we can kind of pick and choose which one we want, but the premise of the book is that we need to be producing all of these, the fruit of the Spirit is all of these things. And so he tells you in the introduction that this book is written from the conviction that the church in the United States is seriously ill. The aim of this book is to help the church to name accurately and honestly with what ails it. And the premise is that we're not producing the fruit of the Spirit like we should. And he's a guy, I'm pretty sure, at least, that he is a denominational guy. But anyway, it's a really good book. It's one of those, obviously, you can spit out a few bones that are in there, but for the most part, you're going to be challenged and agree with everything that he writes in that. So that's the first one. The other one is written by a good friend of mine and yours. That is a great book on church growth. It's written by Neil Pollard, called Rise Up and Build. And it is a book that he details several different things that are necessary for church growth. If you know Neil very well, you know he is not only a good Bible student and a great minister, but a really good writer as well. And so you also know that he likes to alliterate. So every one of these things in the book begin with an E. Expository, exploration, evangelism, edification, education is one of the things that he talks about, as we're going to talk about today. Elimination, enthusiasm, eldership, effort, evangelist, encouragement, emulation, expectation, and then the epilogue. And so lots of E's in there, but really good book. And as is the case with most of Neil's books, they're not difficult reads. You can see it's not a real thick book, but it's a good book to read. It also makes for a good, all in the Church of Christ, all of our books we publish have to have 13 chapters for a quarter of Bible study, and that's the way this one is as well. So it makes for a good Bible study. At the end of each chapter, there's 4 or 5 questions for thoughts in each of them. But it is an excellent book. I used it when I was preaching in Paris, Tennessee. I used it for a quarter of the auditorium class. We went through each of those, and it's just a really good study. So I'd recommend both of those.
There you go. I'll put those up there, and anybody who's interested, again, we'll put these in the show notes, and I'm going to try and bring up those that I'm going to do today. One is called Point Man. If I can get it up right here. It's this one.
That's
right
a good
here.
one.
There we go. So I've got it up there for you. Point Man. This is by Steve Farrar. It's been a while since I've read this book, but if you are, if you're searching for a great book on the family and leading your family from the perspective of what's called a point man, this is a really good book for you. Steve Farrar is a great writer. He's not a member of the church. He's I don't know if he's a denominational preacher or he graduated from Western Seminary, a doctorate from Dallas Theological Seminary. This is where Tyler's going to say that I've got to stay out of his lane. Our liberal friend, as he likes to call himself. But anyway, Steve Farrar is a great writer, and he has several books, including this one. And I'll just give you a few of the, in the table of contents, a few of the chapters. Point Men on Patrol. And I'll tell you, there is a great illustration that he gives in that that's actually, if I remember right, takes you through, maybe it's the Vietnam War, where you are leading a platoon through the jungle, and you're the point man. You're the guy that's going through there, watching out for everything to protect your men. He goes through the great illustration and then changes it, and he said, "Now you're leading your family through. What are you looking for?" And it really puts a lot of great things into perspective. He has a chapter called "Save the Boys," "Real Men Don't," "A One Woman Kind of Man." Anorexic Men and Their Bulimic Cousins. Great chapter title. Telling your kids what you don't want to tell them. There's a lot of great things in here. If you're looking for a great book on ministry or on family, can include this in your ministry. I definitely have in some of my preaching and some of the things that we have done as he talks about the family, marriage, parenting, a lot of stuff and how you can look out for your family. Point Man right here. Excellent book. I highly recommend it. Again, with much of this, you definitely want to, I think there might be a few bones. I don't think it's too bad in there. And the next one, I've got to make sure. I don't know if this one is actually on Amazon or not. Let me see. The Preacher as Counselor. Corey, have you read this book?
I don't think so.
There it is, right there. This is actually by our good friend Dale Jenkins. Dale did not write this whole book, but he wrote a good portion of it. And then he has several actual professional counselors write several chapters in here from a counseling perspective. And so if you're a preacher out there, and you know, a lot of us, we have people come into our offices a lot, and you know, if you're like me, I am not a counselor. I'm not licensed as a counselor. To be very honest, I don't really have a great desire to do that. If people come into my office and I'm discussing things with them and they're needing some help, I try to minister to them and lead them in the right direction the best way that I can. But there are limits to where I can go, and this is a great book that helps you to kind of understand those limits. So Dale put this together several years ago, and as soon as it came out, I bought it, and it is an excellent read, has a lot of great information, and he gives you a lot of good things from a preacher's standpoint of things to do, things not to do, things to look for, knowing your limits, things of that nature. And so he discusses being a counselor, tips for better counseling, things to stop doing, your best self, the help you give. He really talks about a lot of things to know about yourself and your limits and what you should be as you offer counsel or ministering to other people. But then you have Scott Patterson, Jeremy, I hope I say this right, Hinote, or maybe it's Hinote, that gives writes a chapter. Eric Dishong, Ryan Daniel, Mark Butts, and Brian Gregory are all professional counselors, and each one of them have a specific chapter that they write on. Scott Patterson writes on Counseling 1, Recovering from an Affair, and offers some great stuff. Jeremy Hinote talks about counseling teens. So they really offer some great insights. Again, this is by Dale Jenkins. You can find it right here on Amazon. You can also go to the JenkinsInstitute.com and purchase this. And I definitely recommend anything that Jenkins put out. Got a lot of good stuff over there. The JenkinsInstitute.com. You might hear them called TJI. But head over there. Great book. Highly recommend it for anybody in ministry. And, you know, if you're a person who maybe you're not in full-time ministry, but you are involved in some of this and you're looking to, people look to you for advice and things, and you're just kind of in that leadership role, elder, deacon, doesn't matter. This is a great book to read and will greatly help, I feel. So those are it. Those are our books of the day. We will link them for you in the show notes so that you can do what you will with those. Again, we're not being sponsored to talk about these. They didn't send us a check, nothing. These are what we've.
In fact, the authors may rather we not talk about them, but
they may call us and say, "Don't ever say our names again." That might be right. I don't know. Hopefully, that's not what they're going to do. But if Steve Farrar is listening to our podcast, I think that's something, whether he likes us or not.
Yeah.
So cup half full.
And
man.
Philip Kennison and Philip Kennison as well.
Yeah. So, I guess we got to be positive. We're untying from the negative side of things.
That's right.
Oh man. Well, hopefully those will help you in what you're doing and your reading. And I realize that not everybody's a reader. Most of these are probably offered on audio, and a lot of times you'll find them free on Kindle. So if you're, not wanting to purchase a book, look at those options. Amazon does a great job offering a lot of those on Kindle for free. So take a little bit each night and read. Challenge yourself to do that. You'll really grow in your time of taking in some of these things. Well, that leads us into our main topic, I feel, which is education. Education. And we're specifically talking about education in the church. And so we want to look at this from a few different aspects, the good, bad, and the ugly of education. I think that there will always be room for improvement. If we're not always looking for improvement or ways that we can improve in how we're educating the next generations, then we're probably going to stop moving pretty quick. I know, Corey, you've been involved in education for a long time with Bear Valley, and I highly encourage anybody out there to check out Bear Valley and all that they offer. They've got you can take courses for free out there. Excellent courses with excellent teachers. If you're needing something that is you're needing to be able to go attend a class on your own time because of your schedule, World Video Bible School has a lot of great things out there. Heritage Christian has some good stuff. They've got classes you can take free to Hardeman. These things are out there. If you're wanting to take some education courses, maybe even specifically on education, there's a number of resources out there that you can turn to and grow in. And so we highly encourage everybody to do that. But Corey, let's dive into this whole education idea. I don't know where to really start with this, but it's so important that we're focusing on this. And sometimes I feel, maybe if we start off in the negative and then work to the positive of it, sometimes I feel that education in the church and our congregations is probably something that is overlooked. I think that probably depends on the congregation. Not everyone is like that. But sometimes it gets overlooked, and I don't think that it's an intentional thing, but maybe unintentionally gets overlooked because we're so focused on X, Y, Z. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that as we enter into this idea?
Well, maybe to kind of give a little bit, there's different levels of education. Of course, there's the one-on-one study. There's the Bible class. Sunday morning, Wednesday nights, whatever typically is your congregation's meeting times or whatever. There's other opportunities like devos and small groups or whatever that get together. Then, as you talk about, there's even beyond that, just as far as training in the Bible, we think about some of those things like Bear Valley as training preachers, and yes, they train preachers and ministers, but we also have individuals that just want to learn the Bible, and we actually end up with more than a few individuals that are willing to do that. So, all of that is important because ultimately that's one of the responsibilities that we have is to share, to dispense the gospel, the good news, and to help people grow. Maybe Matthew 28 is a good place to start in the Great Commission, because I think we think of that primarily as how do we get people to the point where they will be baptized and become a Christian or whatever. But if you look at the imperative there that he's telling us is to make disciples. And that's really the point that of the Great Commission. As you are going is probably a better way to translate that first part of verse 19, but make disciples is an imperative. And then there's two of those ing words that tell us how to fulfill that obligation, baptizing them and teaching them. And it may be that, we sometimes think, well, Jesus, you got that in the wrong order, because you have to teach them before you baptize them. And obviously, the fact that you're baptizing them, there has to be some teaching that's gone forward. You've taught them who Jesus is and their need for his blood, his sacrifice, to be followers of him, and you're baptizing them for the remission of sins. But then that other teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, that happens after baptism. That's not happening before baptism. You're not teaching them everything that they have to do before you baptize them.
Right.
But it's a continuous education that's how we make disciples, is we get them in Christ by baptizing them into Christ. And then that's probably the thing that we, that we neglect the most, is the teaching after baptism. It's like we have these babes in Christ, and we give them a new Bible, and we say, all right, take off. And don't spend the time to help them grow and mature by teaching them and educating them. So that really is the point of what we're doing, is to make disciples. That certainly involves, introducing people to Jesus and bringing them to the point of conversion. But then it's, discipling them beyond that. And a huge part of that is educating them.
Mm. Yeah, and I've been highlighting a few things here, and this whole teaching them, it's to observe all that I've commanded you. And, even I think that this has, the things that you're being commanded to do is they're really not that hard, and they're really not that complicated. To observe the laws of God, to observe his ways, to walk a certain way, to be like your teacher. And that's the whole thing that he's emphasizing here, is this is going to allow you to show your love for God. That's 1 John 5, verses 1 through 3. Whenever I'm able to observe those commandments, I'm able to show my love for God, because I'm being, as Romans would say in Romans 1:5 and Romans 16:25 or 6, that we're, Paul would say, be faithfully obedient to the Lord, because that's what he's searching for. That's what he's desiring for us, is to live a faithfully obedient life. And then, so when Jesus gave this to the disciples, the apostles, or soon to be, that's what they were to learn how to do, was to be faithful to God. And I think that that's a big thing that you mentioned, was one, whenever a person is converted, sometimes they are forgotten, and in some cases they're expected to be completely different. And that's such a tragedy, and I don't think that that's always done on purpose. It probably never done on purpose. But we have to realize that when a person comes up out of the water, their life is still the same. Like, there's nothing different. The only thing that's changed is they are now a child of God. Now they're able to receive spiritual blessings. Now they have forgiveness. They have all the things that we have in Christ Jesus. But when they go to work, the same people are there. They've gone home to the same problems. They're walking out the door with the same addictions. They're going forward with the same past. There's nothing different. And this is why it's so important for us to continue to disciple and teach these folks. So from that perspective, this is so important that we're following up and keeping up with these people that we are converting, and to help them to grow. And the reality is that knowledge. I don't want people to take this out of context, but knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean like power over somebody or anything like that, but the more knowledge you have, the more power you have internally. Does that make sense? Like the more power I have to overcome who I used to be, the more power I have to take control of my life, to take control of the things that I haven't previously been in control of. So the more you know, the better off you'll be, and that comes with the whole education process of being discipled in the Lord.
Yeah, and it's sometimes this will sound bad, and maybe you'll want to take me outside the city gates and stone me to death. But we sometimes get so focused on truth that we miss the mark. And I'm not saying truth is not important, but we're so myopically focused on what is right and what is wrong, and here's the truth of the word, that we forget the purpose that God gave it for is to change our lives, and that doesn't mean like, here, preach this or you're going to hell, turn or burn, kind of deal. It means that we're helping people to understand. And like you said, I don't think anybody intentionally says, all right, once we baptize them, we're just going to turn them loose and forget about them.
Yeah.
It's just that we become so focused on baptism that we don't have that. And really and truly, if we're going to be good educators, we've got to be good students ourselves. And the way that it should work is that if we are, if we're really someone who loves to study the Word of God, James talks about not everyone should want to be teachers. So one of the reasons why not everyone should want to be teachers is because not everyone's wanting willing to study to be teachers. And the old joke about, well, you preachers just work 4 hours a week or whatever. But the amount of time that goes into that Bible class, that bulletin article, that sermon, that whatever you're teaching and preaching. But like if you can pull up Ezra chapter 7, one of my favorite verses, Michael Hyde introduced me to this book, really thinking about it along this line, or this verse rather, thinking along this line about Ezra. And of course, Ezra was one of the ones that was kind of leading the people as they came back from captivity. But Ezra 7 and verse 10 is such a powerful verse, because he says, Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. And we want to jump to the teaching part, but there's 2 steps before that: setting our heart to study the law and setting our heart to do the law ourselves. But what happens, to me, the best teachers are the ones that are really excited. I'll never forget, if you're going downstairs to the Bear Valley classrooms, you go down a little bit and then there's like a switchback landing, whatever. Well, I'm going down to BRC1 to teach, and Wayne Berger was coming up from BRC1, having just got through with his class teaching the book of Acts. And Wayne taught the book of Acts. Wayne Berger taught Acts for 25, 28, something like that at Bear Valley.
Yeah.
I'm not real sure that Luke could have passed some of his tests that he gave. He probably knew the book that well. But anyway, I'm going down and he's coming up. And if you remember the old Reese's Peanut Butter Cup commercials, where they round the corner, they bump into each other, and you got your chocolate and my peanut butter. Well, we had a head-on collision because I was running down the stairs too fast. And Wayne was walking upstairs with his Bible like this and his nose and finger in it. And when we collided, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Wayne." He said, "I'm sorry, it's my fault. Hey, let me show you what I learned today." And he was so excited. Something that he had never really noticed or thought about before came up in the discussion in class that day. And he couldn't wait to get upstairs to the offices to all the other instructors so he could say, "Look at what that's Wayne." And that's the things that, like when I dig and study in a text, a scripture, whatever, and I find something cool in there. Like today I'm going to be teaching Psalm 1, and there is a particular word in there that changes the whole meaning of the psalm. Well, maybe not the whole meaning of the psalm, but it dramatically affects the way you look at least one verse of it. And the first time I saw it, I was like, that is so cool. I got to tell people about that. That's what Ezra did. And that's what Wayne Berger did. And that's what we need to do if we're going to be good. If we're going to really, appreciate education for how we should, it begins there with we need people that are willing, that are students of the word, that get fired up about digging and finding those cool threads that are there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I rambled a little too long, but
no, I you see, I already had this underlined, and this is one of those places that I felt is extremely important too. And you pointed this out, but noticing all he did, he set his heart. And it was to study the law of the Lord, to practice it, to teach it, and that those are the things that every one of us should do. And you think about it, this is the third phase of folks that went back from captivity. So they have been in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and they've been released. Of course, Babylon's not in power anymore, as they've been taken over by the Medo-Persian Empire and released back to, this is the second wave, going back to Israel. And so this is where, and I don't know how you like to put it, but, Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple and started that work, and Ezra came back to rebuild the religion, their faith, if you will. And of course, Nehemiah rebuilt the wall later on, but that's it. It all started right here, and I believe that Ezra is actually, he was a scribe, and is actually one of the founding people, if I understand right, of what we know as the Sanhedrin. So, a part of that group that we talk about a lot with the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, all that within the New Testament. And so, not that he came up with everything that they did, but he was very set on teaching these things, which is important because when they got away from these things, that's how they got into captivity in the first place. So in 2 Kings 24, whenever they're raided and taken away and overcome, this is why. So it is so important for us to study these things. And I think it's important to say this. I was never, have never, will never be a good student. I've never been a fan of school, traditional school. I don't care if you're a homeschool, public school. I was not a good student. I didn't like it. I got through it, learned like everybody else, but it just wasn't. So the idea of being in school or learning is just not something I've ever been a fan of in a school setting. But when it comes to the text, there's something different about it. And I can't tell you how many Bible students have told me this, how many preachers have told me this, that this actually means something. Yeah, if you're going to be an accountant, math means something to you. If you're going to be a counselor, there's a lot of stuff that means something to you. If you're going to be a doctor, there's a lot of stuff that means something to you. Well, this means more than anything. And because there is eternity is connected to this, and good things and blessings are connected to this, it makes it so much better and easier to study because of the meaning behind it. And even if it does take a while to learn something or understand something, the journey to get there is great. And
you never get tired of studying it because there's always more to learn.
Right. And the connectivity. You ever seen that image? For those, I don't know if I could search it up real quick, but there's an image that's out there that shows how the Bible connects. And I mean, it's just lines all over the place. You can't even tell the difference but everything connects to everything. It's such a, I don't know what that's called. There's a fancy name for that. I'm not sure what it is, but the Bible is just a living, breathing thing. And that's what makes it just, so awesome to learn, to teach. But I thought you brought up a great point, and then I'll be quiet and let you talk. But good educators are good Bible students. That is a great quote, and something we all need. We should all be teachers, and every one of us is a teacher to a different degree. Some are great with the masses, some are great on one-on-one, some are great with small classes. Everybody has different gifts in that from that perspective. But no matter whether you're just teaching your children or preaching to the thousands, good educators are good Bible students. I think that's something to be said. That's a great quote.
Yeah, and they're taking that craft seriously. They're students of that craft as well. What we like for most congregations, I think, we have maybe half the people that are at Bible class that are at our AM worship. Well, why is that? Well, maybe it's because in part we're not taking, Bible school as seriously as we should. And I'm kind of stereotyping here, and if this
Sure.
doesn't fit your congregation, your situation, that's great. But, typically what we do, well, Garrett, he got baptized 2 years ago, so now it's time for him to start teaching. Even though we may not have really trained Garrett, first of all, how to walk with Jesus very much. Second of all, we've given him zero training to teach. Well, it may be that Garrett is a high school English teacher, and so he knows some principles of education or that kind of thing. Or he may be a salesman of fertilizer for co-op, but we don't even think about that. It's just so I think part of we need to take education more seriously by training people how to study the Bible, by training them how to develop a lesson, by training them how to present a lesson in a way that's effective. And, I get, we need to have smaller classes and more classes. We need to get, again, there's people that will maybe disagree with. We need to get out of the auditorium because there's no discussion typically that goes on unless you're a small church or whatever. If you have very much size, you're not going to have a lot of discussion in an auditorium class. At least discussion that everybody can hear. In our building, if somebody is on the other side of the auditorium and they make a comment, they sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. It's and then the teacher will say, "That's a really good point." Now moving on to verse 4, and I'm like, wait, but we have to have more teachers, and we have a struggle getting teachers. My experience has been the main reason why people don't want to teach is because they don't think they know how to teach. And if we'll spend the time training them, they're a lot more willing. And again, going back to that discipling, teaching them how to teach, and then, putting some knowledgeable guys, experienced guys in the class, or ladies in the class with them to help them while they get their feet underneath them, then they're a lot more willing to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think it's more of a education in certain places is where it is because of the fact that we're not training teachers, or is it curriculum, or is it kind of all together kind of thing? I agree that a lot of people are like, I'm not going to teach. I don't know enough, or I'm not skilled enough, or what if, I mess up or I teach something wrong? There's a lot of fear with that. But do you think that there's anything else surrounding that as well with, is it just a teacher issue, or is it their curriculum issues, or, what are things that you think are out there that might be hindering this on, kind of beside that?
Well, I think it can be either or a combination of, depending on the different congregation. But I think overall, we've done a poor job of training teachers
Yeah.
I think overall we've relied on the same curriculum over and over, and it's become a crutch. We get it. When I was growing up, they would get on to us if we didn't get our lessons before we come to class. Well, more and more I find people admitting to me that, I just hadn't really studied this lesson. I just get there and open up the book and read what it says or whatever, especially in smaller children's classes or whatnot. But part of that is, again, we haven't taken it as seriously as probably we should. And again, my experience has been when the leadership takes it very serious. All right, we're going to develop material, or we're going to, have teacher training workshops. Our Michael Hyatt, we brought him out here to Martin, and he did a weekend teacher training seminar that was great. And he's done that in a variety of other places. Taking the time to have a teacher appreciation workshop. You've got to develop. One of the reasons why people don't want to teach is because they don't feel like they've been trained or that they can do it or whatever. Or we've kind of used 1 Peter a little bit out of context, be ready to give an answer, to mean that you've got to know every answer to every question before you can teach. Part of it is, I think, I'm afraid to sign up to teach the 7th and 8th grade class because it may turn into a life sentence that I may be there forever if I do,
Yeah.
And well, how do you fix that? Well, you develop more teachers, and helping everybody see the need to be a teacher, and that and it's not everybody's gift. We talked about spiritual gifts. I get that it's not everybody's spiritual gifts, but helping those that do have that gift, to work on and polish that and actually use it in his service is so very important. But again, it all begins with, leadership in a congregation taking it as seriously as maybe they should, I think.
Yeah. I remember the first class that I taught, you're going to laugh at this, was Hebrews. I didn't know anything about Hebrews. I went and I had a few, I had like one commentary on it that I'd gotten from somewhere. I don't even remember what it was. I have no idea if it was any good or not. And it was actually right after I'd attended I think probably after I attended my first workshop in the Word with Denny and Guy Orbison. And so I'm trying to mimic whatever it was that I found up there. And I got through it. I don't think anybody probably got anything out of it, but that was the first one that I taught. And I'll say this, that everything you said is absolutely true. I had no business probably teaching. I had no business teaching that class. I did not understand that book, anything like I do now, of course. And, 20 years from now, I'll say that about myself now. But that was the first one. I remember being so nervous about it and just hoping that I could say the right things. Well, nobody ever talked to me about doing anything. And I'd preached some lessons very early in getting into ministry. And, you would teach this class. Yeah. And why did I say yeah? Because I'm ready to go. My fire is lit. I'm ready to get on with this thing. But yeah, I had no training, no anything. But not everybody, that didn't stop me. I wanted to know more, but that's not everybody's thing. And if something would have gone really bad in that class, maybe I would have felt different after. But, kind of going back to what we were talking about with a new convert, I think it's important for us to understand this. We should never be holding somebody to a standard that they should not be held up to. A new Christian cannot be held to the same standard as you or I. And a brand new teacher should never be held to the same standard as somebody's been teaching for 30 years. Sometimes we do that. So whenever a new guy or even a new lady gets up there to teach a class, and that class might be it might be the most boring thing you've ever been in. It might be all over the place, and I know that this happens, and it probably, maybe it doesn't happen everywhere. Maybe it does. I don't know, but we should never walk out of that auditorium or that classroom complaining about them. That right there will drive somebody away from ever teaching again. They may have spent, like you said, hours and hours and hours on that lesson. This is their first one, their first class, their first this or that, and we're holding them to a different standard. That does nothing but drive people out of a position like that. And we don't want to do that. We've got to be encouragers. And the more we're able to encourage people in doing those things, the more that it's going to drive them to learn the craft of teaching. They're going to learn more, from a biblical perspective, and they're, gaining their knowledge so that they can share more. But the journey has to start somewhere. And the beginning of the journey is not anywhere close to the end. So right. we've got to be mindful of that. And, alongside that, we want to offer, we've got to be offering our folks who are wanting to teach, we've got to offer them the tools to help them to grow. And most teachers out there, they start teaching, they're searching for any curriculum, anything they can use. And sometimes they just don't know where to look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the truth is, we typically teach the way we were taught.
Right. And
part of this, I think we need to learn to get out of the box and realize, I don't want to teach because, I don't know everything about this text or topic or whatever. But if we train people we can leverage that. There's a lot more in my audience, the class that I'm teaching. And again, if we're not in the auditorium, if we're in a classroom with tables and stuff of that nature, I think this works a little bit better. But you can get people involved in, ask questions and, tell them to work here's a question for us to consider from what is this verse? This verse has 4 ways of telling us how to be a better follower of Jesus. I want you to work in your table. We're going to spend about 10 minutes and y'all work on that together. Well, then you're just walking around and listening in and helping guide the conversation from table to table. But, if you do stuff like that, if you become a learner, not a teacher, if you think of the people in the class as your colleagues, not we're students and teachers,
yeah.
If you're a lifelong learner and drawing on their experiences, we've made people think that you can't be a teacher until you're the wise sage that knows everything.
Yeah.
But you're not the wisdom they need to draw on. You all have experience and wisdom, but the text is where we're wanting to get them into. And so you need to invite dialogue. You need to ask questions that will help them, start a discussion, that type of thing. And then grow in the application of it. You start doing some of those things and you're going to get more people wanting to come to class and more involved in the class. They've got skin in the game in the class. And then as the teacher, you're not expected to get up there and lecture for 45 minutes. Then suddenly you're just helping to, lead the conversation in the way that it needs to go, keep us on task. But you're bringing your passion to it. And then that helps. There's, we did book recommendations already, but there's several books by Jane Vella that I think are really good on this. She's got one book that's Learning to Listen, Learning to Teach, or something like that. Training through dialogue. There's a couple, I don't know, there's more than a couple, but she's got several books on those kinds of things. And if we can help people to think of teaching in class as more of a discipleship rather than I'm going to get up here and lecture you for an hour, then not only I think will we have more students engaged in the class, but we'd have more people willing. Well, I can do that. I can get up and start a conversation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. What was the name of that author?
Jane Vella. I think it's Vella.
Okay.
But she's got several books about education and learning, and it's not so much really per se about. I mean, she's just I think she's with the University of North Carolina, but it's more about education than it is about necessarily religion.
Yeah.
But the principles are there in work, and so anyway, there's a again that goes back to the training. How are we training people to teach? What are our expectations? If our expectation is to fill 45 minutes before or after worship, well, it's little wonder why our education programs are not where they need to be.
Yeah.
But if our goal is we really want to get people engaged and passionate about studying the Bible, then those are things that we can do. So,
yeah, I love the where was it at? Training through dialogue. I think that's the one it was. Getting people involved in class is the big deal. I think that's one of the greatest fears, that you ask the question and then nobody says a word.
mm-hmm.
and you're like,
you got to be okay with silence.
You got to be okay with silence. Yeah. And that can be hard. There's a lot of things to get used to whenever you're teaching. And depending on who you're teaching, there are different things to get used to. So whether you're teaching the adults or the young marrieds, or, however your classes are set up, they're going to be different than the middle school class. That's a different animal. And that's going to be different than, the third and fourth graders that you're teaching. So, we got to take that, of course, into account as well. But I think that, what we're getting at with all of this is one, there are a lot of resources out there that can help you as a congregation and as a teacher. And I think that I can speak on behalf of both of us and Tyler. We encourage you to be teachers. We need more teachers. And if you're going to be, I'm going to keep using this, good teachers, I'm going to use that instead of educators, good teachers are good Bible students. And maybe, from that perspective of a Bible student, some people are fearful of that as well. I would rather, this is me personally, maybe you agree or disagree with this, Corey, but I would rather take one book of the Bible and study that for a whole year than I would to read the Bible all the way through. Now, I'm not against reading the Bible all the way through. Please don't hear me saying that. If you love to do that, please do that, because there's a great amount of benefits with that. But if you're going to learn something, take a year, take a book, letter, if we really get down into what it is, but take one thing and study that one thing. And if you're afraid of size, pick something small. If you're really wanting something small, Jude's your place. Philemon, go.
I agree with you. We spent about a year and a half in Romans in our Wednesday night adult class. Now, part of that was because we had Wednesday night summer series interrupt us, but still, we were. And I told him, I said, this is a big book, and there's a lot of depth there. We're going to take our time. You are going to cover half the book in a weekend, which is going to be a challenge. But we just took our time, and but again, it comes back to, are we focused on the text? Is that what we're trying to do? You mentioned Tyler. I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes from Tyler, and I'm not going to do this word for word, but something to the effect. Tyler once said, we have teenagers that are in advanced placement classes that are doing dual enrollment classes in college and high school.
Yeah.
And then they come to Sunday morning Bible class or Wednesday night Bible class, and we give them a donut or a Pop-Tart, and we spend about 5 or 10 minutes reading a couple of verses and doing a little Devo, and, that's it. And then we wonder why our teens are, leaving the church. Well, they're not being challenged, and they can accept more of a challenge than what we give them sometimes, But again, to your point about it depends on what class you're teaching. The one consistency is we need to challenge them with God's word and help them they need to see our passion to want to. I think about, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the teacher, Bueller, open your Bibles today to the book of John. And today we're going to study the good news of Jesus. Well, okay. But, it's just one of those things, whatever your class, just get out of the box. Don't just get up there and just go through the motions, but be serious and passionate about it. And that will help our education in our congregations as much as anything, is getting people to see that this is exciting stuff and it's really cool, so.
Yeah. And if, not everybody knows Wayne Berger. I don't know.
Unfortunately.
Wayne. I have met Wayne. I've been around him a little bit, but I don't know him near like you. But here's one thing I do know about him is that he is a student. And I remember going through workshop and Denny and Guy were teaching an Acts, and the guy probably that knew the most in the room was sitting down, and that was Wayne, about that one book. And he wasn't sitting in that room with everybody, sitting back and acting like you're telling me everything I already know. He was going through everything that was being talked about as if it was the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not reading his brain or anything like that, but that moment where he's coming up the steps and you ran into him, I know you've had those moments, and I've had those moments, and it is a lot of fun whenever you're finding those things. And yeah, it might be something that people have known for years. But that's not the thing. It's that you found it, and that you came to that conclusion. And it's like you said, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. And
when you teach with dialogue and you help people find it for themselves rather than just tell them, then that's the way they leave class. Is they say, "Man, look at what They don't leave and say, "Man, that Corey's a good teacher." They leave and they say, "Man, that Psalm 1 is a cool text. That John 13 is really awesome." And that's what we want for them. And all of the two things that has most embarrassed me in my preaching life probably was one time that I preached at the Huntington Church of Christ when Dan Winkler was the preacher there. And when Dan's leading singing and I'm preaching, and it's in their Wednesday night summer series. And when I got up, I said, I'm a terrible song leader, but you should have me leading singing and him preaching, As soon as Dan sits down, he pulls out a notebook and starts taking copious notes throughout the entire lesson. Every time I preached in chapel, Denny Petrillo pulls out this big, thick notebook and starts taking notes. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's not one thing that I've probably said that either one of them, but they're students. Let me tell you one more story. I know I'm going overtime, but one of my favorite memories of all time of two men that I admire and love so much, Dave Chamberlain and Donnie Bates. And I know you know Donnie very well, an fellow Oklahomian, but I was taking the Master's Revelation class that was being taught by Dan Owen. Dave Chamberlain and Donnie Bates are both teachers at Bear Valley. Both of them are elders in the church. Dave at that time was the dean of students. Donnie was the academic dean. Dave had been teaching Revelation in the undergraduate program for 25, 30 years. And when the final bell rang at 3:30, because, that was like a 6-hour class that we were in, and we were in those master's classes. They're longer than the undergraduates. But when the 3:30 bell rang, guess who walked into our classroom and pulled out their notebooks and their Bibles and started taking notes? Dave Chamberlain and Donnie Bates. Now, they've been teaching all day long. They've forgotten more Bible than I know. But Dan Owen's teaching Revelation, so they wanted to come learn his perspective on some texts that they have been studying and teaching their entire lives. And I've got a picture, my table back in the corner, that Dan is in the background teaching, and Dave and Donnie are there in front of them. And it was so cool for us as students when Dave is asking, what do you think this represents, Dan? And anyway, my heroes have always been preachers, and especially those guys that want to learn and want to study. And you talking about an impression being molded in your brain of this is what it means to be a man of God. Dave and Donnie taught me a whole lot that day. Maybe as much, if not more, than what Dan taught me out of Revelation, and that's saying something. So
yeah, well, I think the commonality between Dan Winkler, Dan Owen, Donnie, and all those people that you mentioned, as well as others that you have seen and heard from, they're students of the Word, and so they're studying to learn. They're not studying to correct. And that is a habit I think that we have got to get out of, is studying, to correct. Don't go to any class so that you can correct the teacher. And I feel like that's sometimes what's done in places if we're not careful. When Dan Winkler, took out his notebook, he wanted to hear what you had to say, and he wants to write those things down, and he wants to keep those so he can, as you like to say, chew on the cud with all that kind of stuff. And that's the great thing. Those are great examples that all of us need to follow as we're striving to be teachers ourselves. And that is the exact opposite of what we find in James. You're teaching and you should not be teaching. And we've got to be the opposite of that, to where we are striving to be students of the Word so that we can share what we have learned. And that's really all that this is about. Not getting up there and presenting something that someone else came up with out of a workbook. Those are always the worst classes to go to, that they hand out workbooks and then they're like, all right, page 1. And they read off this deal. Well, what do you guys think this means? And then they read, and nobody gets anything out of that. There's nothing we learn. We're just trying to answer questions. So that's, that is one of the things that propelled me even more. And because Kristen and I wanted more than that. So, actually sharing what you have learned so that others can learn is really a great responsibility, a great deal. And it's not something that is really intrusive into your life. It's something that adds to your life. And I found that whenever I did start my journey of education a long time ago, that was the one part of my day I could not wait to get to, was that part where I could go into a class. So I would work all day, and then we'd put the boys were little, and I'd put them down, and then I had my office in my room, my old desk or whatever, and then I would hop on and put my headphones on and listen to Chuck Horner and Denny Petrillo and John Moore and several who were teaching with World Video, and that's what I did. And I couldn't wait to get to that point. And I felt so much better. Even the next morning, I'd be thinking about what I learned, and that I wanted to share that. So it definitely is a driver. The more you learn, the more you want to share. And that will really help our education programs out. And I'll throw this out as we kind of wind this up. One thing that we are striving to do with Excel Still More is this very thing. And so with Excel TV, we're putting together a lot of different films, and a lot of them are in the planning stages, but we have a lot that are out there. With the Excel Still More Bible Workshop, we have documentaries with Bible passages, looking over the Bible lands. We've got a number of things that will help you in your journey to learn with the books, with the films, all that kind of stuff. Take advantage of that resource. And there are a lot of resources that are out there for you to take advantage of. So if there is a kind of a parting anchor thought that kind of sums up everything that we have been discussing, is that our education programs within the church are one of the most important parts of the work of the church, is to educate our folks. It is not necessarily the worship service. It's not necessarily the sermon. Those are all important things, don't get me wrong. But the education part, we're always up in arms. We're always talking about, and we're reading books and looking at stats. Why are our kids leaving? Well, when a child graduates from school, if you were to give them a test over the text, what would their grade be? If you were to ask them these important doctrinal questions, what would their grade be? Well, if you believe their grade is low, then that's probably because we didn't do our job in teaching them. And we can lay that on the parents. We can lay that on a lot of stuff, and rightfully so. There's responsibilities everywhere. But in the congregational setting, as we have class week after week, we should take advantage of that time that we have to challenge all of our children to grow in the Bible and teach those things. A lot of great programs out there to do that. Teaching them to be good Bible students. And that is what we should do. So whenever they do have to figure out something at some point, they're challenged in what they believe, they'll be able to have some tools and connections to be able to find out what those answers are. And so if we can get them to a point where they can be on that level, I think that we've accomplished something. So make sure and focus on the education program of your congregation, and you'll be extremely blessed. You'll find that you'll have elders for longer. You'll be able to have replacements for those elders and deacons and preachers, because when it doesn't start young, we don't fill those positions when we're older, and then we are kind of sitting back going, well, why don't we have all this stuff? Well, we didn't train anybody to replace them. So there is something to that. I think that Titus 2 comes into play with all this, mentoring, teaching, educating, being there to train up younger folks and their families in the text throughout life. There's a great benefit in that. The New Testament teaches about that. The Old Testament shows us examples of how generations fell away because the teaching was not there, and that's why that Ezra chapter 7 is so important, to get them back on track to be able to follow God and all of His commandments. So let's be students. That is the anchoring statement or thought or whatever. Be students so that you can teach, because that's what comes first. Corey, you got anything else you want to share before we end episode 7 of our season 2?
Just teach the word.
Teach the word.
Go Vols.
Go Vols. I've got a funny story real quick as we end. My wife went to the state games this weekend with the boys, state basketball. She has watched the 4A, I believe it was, basketball teams. The stadium was absolutely packed. She is in the parking lot. She's been there 45 minutes. The Oklahoma boys or men's basketball coach is in front of her in his car. She let him go past her. They realized who it was, so they're all waving and everything, because one of the boys that was playing is going to Oklahoma next year. So there's another car trying to cut them off. So the Oklahoma coach is talking to that person, and anyway, there's a whole big deal. Well, there's another car that comes in there, and she is over to the side somehow, and everybody's realizing that this guy is the Oklahoma men's basketball coach. So you've got several going, "Boomer," and he's yelling back "Sooner," and this one lady off to the side rolls down her window, and she said, "Go Vols!" So there was one Tennessee fan out of nowhere at the games, and so I thought you would appreciate that story.
Yep, I do. That's a godly woman there. Hey, and of course, now that we're entering into March Madness, I will be rooting for other SEC teams until they play Tennessee. There's a chance that we could play Kentucky or Texas in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Maybe play Alabama in the Final Four.
Yeah. Well, I've got several brackets filled out, and I'll have you know that I have in one of those brackets Tennessee making it all the way. I'm rooting for Tennessee, but I've got as many brackets as I could fill out. I've got all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't
say I do one sheet of integrity.
One sheet.
Yeah,
I like multiple opportunities.
And I don't have Tennessee even making it to the Final Four because I've watched them all year long and know all the potential problems that they will have. But here's the thing. If they don't make it to the Final Four, then my bracket looks better. If they do, then I'm glad that my bracket doesn't look good. So either way, it's a win-win, you know.
Well, if they make it all the way, then my bracket will look very good.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got several. One of them I've got going pretty far, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Watched the games last night, and it's getting started. So make sure and fill your bracket out if you haven't.
Yep.
It's always fun to travel. So, all right. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. Corey, as always, it's great to have this time with you. For those who are listening to us, we love you, appreciate you so much. We appreciate the comments that you have sent our way, whether it's here or on our website or on YouTube. We certainly welcome all those and hope that we can help you in whatever way. So shoot us some questions, comments, whatever, so that we can try and answer those, or at least give the best answer we can, and help you grow too. So until next time, remember you can catch us every Thursday at noon. If you are wanting to view this, this will always goes live first on Excel TV under the Untied Podcast or the Excel Pod theme there, and you can check us out and the rest of our podcast. A lot of stuff going on there. Be sure to check out the other podcasts on the Excel Pod as well. Scripture Spotlight and Thinking Kingdom. Both of those are doing very well. They're growing, and we're really excited. We have reached, I believe, 8 countries, which is pretty cool with our network. And so it's growing. Help us grow this even more. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And be sure to tune in with us every Thursday at noon. So until next time, we thank you for joining us. We hope that the Lord will continue to bless you in your walk with Him. And we hope that you will stay untied. Corey, give us a little Jesus.